welcome to another episode of Ordinary Gentlemen. I'm Lennox Calafungwa, and today we have a special episode because I have a good friend with me. His name is Bryan Auton. Bryan, I hope I'm getting your last name right. You know, I'm never quite sure how to pronounce it. But
That's
you
right.
know, yeah, Bryan Auton. So Bryan is going to introduce himself in a minute, but I know this conversation is going to be helpful to a lot of men who want to get their money right, who want to be responsible in managing their money in a biblical fashion, in a way that pleases God. And Bryan is, I think, is the perfect person to have this conversation with. One, because he loves the Lord, and because he has done a good job at being responsible for his money. And I think we can learn a lot from him today. So, Bryan, welcome to Ordinary Gentlemen.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So, Bryan, just tell us who you are. Who are you? Who do you belong to? And what exactly do you do?
Yeah. So I live in Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States of America, and I am first and foremost a follower of the Lord Jesus Christ. I love him and long to follow him. And I'm a husband to Kaylee, and we are expecting our 8th kid, and
Amazing.
which is always exciting. And then I am also an owner operator of a Chick-fil-A restaurant in Atlanta. And so I've been an owner operator in this role. I've been doing it for 10 years now.
Amazing.
But I've been with my company, Chick-fil-A, for about 18 years now. So I started working in high school and worked through college. And in college, I decided I wanted to be an owner operator, and happened when I was 24 years old. And so I've been doing it for 10 years now. So it's exciting.
That's incredible. I think that's an amazing story right there, Bryan. But just tell us, what's your experience been like, you know, managing your business for 10 years? And I'm also just interested in knowing what inputs went into giving you and building the success that you've achieved over the years.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's our founder, Truett Cathy. He would often say that it's not even necessarily the food business as much as it is the people business. And I find a great deal of wisdom in that statement. That yes, it is the restaurant industry. And yes, we serve several thousand guests every day at my restaurant. It's all about the people, the joys and the hardships and the challenges and the benefits of my job all are all about the people. Those people that work for me, that I have the opportunity to employ and lead and coach and disciple and challenge, and you know, and all of those things. And so I'd say that would be the hardest thing and the best thing about my job.
Yeah.
That I, as the figurehead of my business, as the owner operator of my business, it's my job to lead them, to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do every day, that they're growing, that they're happy, that they're not stagnant, that they're achieving their goals, and that they're helping me achieve mine. It really is a true partnership, and it's a joy to do that. There's nothing particularly too exciting about the restaurant industry, in my opinion. I mean, it's hot and sweaty at times. It's you don't have long interactions with guests. There, you know, we make it our goal to get them out in 2 minutes or less, and so it's not long, extended conversations. But you do get to see them many times a week, because if we're doing a good job, they're going to come back a lot. And it's provided me a good opportunity to provide for my family, and it's been a great joy to do what I do.
That's incredible. That's incredible. I'm just interested in knowing, Bryan, what do I have to do to get lifetime access to Chick-fil-A?
Well, man, from Zambia, I don't know. I think we'd have to build a restaurant there first. But second, you know, I'll tell you what, if you're ever wanting to come work for me in Atlanta, I'll give you all the chicken you want.
Oh, there we go. This is on record, so let the record show that um, this is a done deal right now, and that's
Done.
awesome.
Signed, sealed, delivered.
Yeah, well, here's the crazy thing, Brian. I've never actually had Chick-fil-A, but I've heard it spoken about so much. And of course, you and your brother-in-law Cameron were here last year, and you spoke a lot about the business, and it was phenomenal to just hear everything. Um, uh, I feel like I understand what Chick-fil-A stands for, but I'm yet to experience what it is people love so much about Chick-fil-A. So I look forward to having my first Chick-fil-A, hopefully at your restaurant one of these days.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you ever fly into the United States, I don't know what airport you stop at when you fly into, when you fly in, but we're not too far from the Atlanta airport. I mean, we're probably 20 minutes from the airport, and we'd love to have you. It's the Atlanta is the home of Chick-fil-A. It started in the city, and it's just grown to really not just the most beloved restaurant brand in all of America, but really it's grown into one of the most beloved brands, period, in our country, which is astonishing because restaurants typically don't do that, especially fast food restaurants. Fast food restaurants are viewed as cheap and quick, and that's it. You kind of come in, you pay a little bit, you get a little bit, and you leave. But really, people have really connected with our brand because we really do want to continue to add value to the experience at a low cost, to show that we care. And our vision right now is to be the most caring restaurant in the entire world. So we want to provide care. We want people to feel cared for. We want people to feel loved, and especially in a spot where we are right now. From a worldwide standpoint of COVID-19, where people feel isolated and people feel alone and people feel scared and worried and everything else. I was talking with my team the other day that never have people needed care more than right now. And Absolutely. So yes, it's about a hot sandwich, and yes, it's about hot fries and a Coca-Cola, but honestly, we, more than anything, we want people to feel cared for when they visit my restaurant.
Absolutely. I think that's what makes Chick-fil-A so unique in that sense. And I think you're selling more than just chicken. You're selling a service, almost an unquantifiable service in that sense. Care and good quality service. So that's I think that's pretty special.
Yeah, and honestly, it's a way that I think from a business standpoint that it's having the idea that we want to do things that our competitors are not willing to do. Mm. And it's not that it's the most unique idea in the world to care for people, to encourage them, to smile, to ask how their day's going, to ask them if they have any weekend plans, to do all these things that just to connect with them. It's not like, wow, I can't believe I never thought of that.
Sure.
Just the reality is that our competitors just don't care. Mm. They know the right thing to do. they know that that really moves the needle for sales growth and brand growth, and they just don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And so the issue is, hey, how can we do this on a day-to-day basis, knowing that none of our competitors do it, continue to innovate, continue to reinvent, continue to do all this day in and day out, but also to maintain authenticity. So it's not just fake or forced or, patronizing.
Yeah.
But to say, hey, we really do want to see these people as human beings made in the image and likeness of God, who need love, who need encouragement. And may we really be the hands and feet of Jesus every day.
Amen. Yeah.
In the platform of selling sandwiches.
Absolutely. That's awesome. That's really awesome. Bryan, just moving on a little bit. I just want to know just a little bit of your backstory here. this is a podcast about men, and it's for men, and we endeavor to master the art of masculinity. That's our goal. And I just want to know, just what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned about masculinity in your life?
Hmm. Yeah. So, man, I've really been through a roller coaster of ideas of masculinity, I think, throughout my life. And I think there's been like pendulum swings of masculinity is this and masculinity is this. And I think for a long time, I thought of masculinity as personality traits.
Mm,
Like, to be masculine is to be type A
mm,
and overly loud and bold and aggressive.
mm.
And and don't get me wrong, um, there is a degree of masculinity that needs to be bold
Yeah,
and needs to be aggressive.
yeah,
But it's not always like like I think in my early 20s, and I know he's kind of gone off the rails a little bit, but kind of my like definition of masculinity was
go
probably
ahead,
like
go ahead. I love it.
a Mark Driscoll, like who was just like he'll say anything and he's going to say it like level 10 degree of intensity, and so that kind of version of masculinity was really attractive to me as a young man, and um, I tried to mirror that, and it was very it was, people would be very put off by that. But I thought of masculinity as a personality trait, and
Yeah,
then the Lord put people in my life who were bold and who stood for the truth, who were intentional and aggressive and took risks and things of that nature, who were quiet natured,
mm,
who were
mm,
humble, um, and who the Lord used in mighty ways. And I would say there were some of the most masculine men that I knew, that being masculine is more than just going out there and shaking a stick and having the loudest battle cry.
yeah,
Uh,
mm,
that masculinity is more about character
mm,
than it is about personality.
right.
So I think the Lord's really, over the past few years, tried to ingrain that in me.
Mm,
Um, I don't have to go out there and portray some type of image, or you know uh, try to look or sound a certain way in order to be masculine.
right.
And I think we see that in Jesus, right? That Jesus was the one who would hold a little child.
Mm,
He's the one who would weep over his friend.
yeah,
He is the one who um, would dine with sinners and laugh and have a good time.
yeah,
And he's the one who would also, you know, rebuke the Pharisees when needed, turn over the tables of the money changers in the temple. He's ultimately the one who, in courage and obedience to the Father, would lay down his life for us.
mm,
And it wasn't about a personality. It wasn't
yeah,
about projecting some type of image. It was about holiness and
absolutely.
character and righteousness. And I think that has been maybe one of the bigger lessons that I've learned in between my 20s and now my mid 30s, of just the importance of character,
Yeah,
the importance of obedience, being consistent,
mm,
having a clear understanding of who the Lord has called us to be as men. And
mm,
yeah, there's a book by Stu Weber called Four Pillars of a Man's Heart, and I don't know if you've read it. I don't think it's a very well-known book, but it's a book that kind of impacted me from my father-in-law when I was in my teens,
mm,
of basically these four aspects of our heart being king, warrior, mentor, and friend.
yeah,
And just really seeing how, like, as we look at these pillars, any one of these pillars could be off balance.
mhm,
The king, if it's leaning one way, the extreme could be passivity,
yeah,
where I don't provide a vision for my family. I don't provide. The other extreme could be you're a tyrant and you're dominant, and you're not a servant leader, but you're demanding.
yeah,
It's all about you.
mm,
And any one of those pillars, where the king, warrior, mentor, friend, can have these these ways in which you go to these extremes and they're sinful. And the Lord has truly called us to be those things as a man. We're called to be a king. We're called to cast vision.
Yeah.
We're called to be servants.
Yeah.
We're called to cultivate and take dominion. Warrior. We're called to fight.
Absolutely.
No, we're not ones who jump into fights quickly. We're not called to be weak. But we're also not called to always be slinging our gun around. But we fight the right battles. We stand for the truth. We stand for righteousness. We stand for justice. Mentor. We're called to disciple. We're called to take younger men and our children, and we're called to disciple them. We're called to be there for them, to teach them, to be patient with them. And we're called to be a friend. We're not just to be a friend, but to have friends. We're not loners. We are men that even Adam in the garden, God says, in the midst of this of perfection and holiness, God says it's not good for man to be alone.
Yeah.
And we were made for companionship. We were made for friendship. That we're not just on an island all by ourselves with our own ideas and our own, whatever. We were made to relate. Yeah. And so as you think about king, warrior, mentor, friend, again, it's all about character. It's all about obedience. It's about who God has called us to be. And I think, where do we obviously get that standard of masculinity? It's from God's word alone. We don't need to look to Hollywood. We don't need to listen to music or social media to try to get some definition of masculinity. We can look at the person of Jesus Christ and say that is masculinity. That is the picture perfect definition of masculinity, as he really did portray that king, warrior, mentor, friend description that I'm talking about.
That is so good. That is so good, Bryan. I think you should consider writing a book on this.
I don't know, man. I'll tell you what. I can write about all the ways in that I've messed up my false definitions of masculinity that got me in trouble. That the Lord is convicting me of.
That's really good. That's really good. So Bryan, I just want to get this quickly. You've got 8 kids, 1 on the way, and I just want to know, how many sons and daughters do you have?
So right now, 5 sons, 2 daughters, and the baby that's on the way, the 8th, we don't know yet.
Okay.
This has been the very first time that we've waited to find out until.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's cool. That's exciting.
Yes.
That's awesome. Now, I'm just curious to know. You've got 5 sons, so how are you looking to raise your sons? Just especially in the context of what you've just been speaking about now, and maybe even more specifically, raising your sons in a postmodern world. Just what truths do you want to instill in them? What are you trying to build them to be? Sure.
Well, first and foremost, we want to raise them in the fear of the Lord, and so we do our best to take family worship seriously, family discipleship seriously. We catechize our children. Tom Askell's put out a wonderful resource, the Truth and Grace Memory books. I think he's got 3 of them now. And so we're intentional about doing that. We're intentional about singing. We're intentional about, studying books of the Bible. But we also do things about, like, we've got a wide range of children. So from 11 all the way down to 1. And so there's different levels of knowledge that each one of them has. So sometimes we'll read a children's book, but most of the time we're trying to go straight through the books of the Bible. So right now we're studying through Joshua and trying to teach them, about Christ in the Old Testament. And so that's intentional there as far as theological training and trying to raise them to fear the Lord. We're also teaching them, we homeschool our children, and we're trying to teach them the value of hard work, the values of doing a job right. It's easy. it can be easy in homeschooling to say like, well, we don't have some other like teacher who's not us grading this and looking at this. And so it can be like, it's easy to say, okay, well, sure, your handwriting's sloppy. We don't really care.
Yeah.
It's good enough because we can read it. No, you do the best that you can do.
Absolutely.
You know, you were made in the image and likeness of God. You were called to create. You were called to cultivate. You were called to take dominion. Do the best job that you can. Like laziness is a result of the fall, and so we want to be people who like God worked for 6 days. We want to be people who are hardworking. When we are hardworking and we create, we are demonstrating as image bearers God's character.
Yeah.
And so I want my sons to see that.
Yeah.
I want them to value hard work, not to gain necessarily the things of this world. Although I do think that when we tend to work hard, that oftentimes we will make more money and we will gain things. But that's not the primary reason we work hard. We work hard because it demonstrates the character of God, the holiness of God. And so that's one thing lately I would say that I'm wanting to instill in my sons, that the attention to detail, because I think it's a character issue. And so sometimes that means that you just completed an assignment and you spilled a little bit of water on the paper.
Yeah.
And I can read it, but you would never turn that into a Boston day. You would never turn that into another professor.
Yeah. And
so it's teaching them these things now at a young age, while they're still moldable and
yeah.
So hard work and character, helping out around the home, trying to do chores and allowing. We were fixing a lock on my door a few weeks ago, and I could have done it myself much faster, but I had my son coming next to me and trying to help me learn how to do a few things around the house. I didn't have that kind of privilege growing up, and so I'm already well behind the curve on like a lot of the fixer-upper stuff or fixing things around the home. I'm not great at that, but the things that I can do, I want to teach my sons, and so that they can learn how to provide for their family, take care of their family, and steward their things well, to the glory of God. And so yeah, I mean, just theological training, practical training, work training, all of these things. I want my sons to really take dominion and create and cultivate and be men that are beneficial to their families and beneficial to their churches and beneficial to society as they demonstrate the character of God. I think all these things are important. That I think oftentimes we think that I just need to teach my sons some Bible verses, and again, everything we do is grounded in the Word of God.
Yeah.
But it's also important to teach our kids skills to be providers in their family, to be beneficial to their societies, but again, grounded. What is the why of that? Why do we provide? Why do we create? Why do we why do we do that? Because again, we demonstrate the character of God. We're called to do that as men. Adam was called to do that in the garden. We see Paul working hard in the New Testament and grinding, and he was ambitious, and all these things. It's not just an Old Testament idea. It wasn't just a pre-fall idea, that we're called to do that now. And I want my sons to see that.
I think that's really good, and I think you've kind of just given a wonderful introduction, just kind of whet our appetites for what we're about to get into now. What I want to know now, getting into some specific, is why do you think it's important for men to understand what it means to be providers and to manage their finances well?
Sure. Yeah. Well, well, first of all, it's extremely important. God's word calls us to provide. We are we are the authority in our family. We are the king in our family. We are the visionary of our family, and of course we know it is the Lord who provides everything for us. He is the true provider. He is the true king. But the Lord has placed us in our family, and He uses us to provide. We are called to do that. And so at the basic core, we are to ensure that our family basic needs are met. That not just, and oftentimes we think that is just financially.
Yeah.
And financially, finances are only a part of it. Money's only a part of the way in which we're called to provide for our family. We're called to make sure all of the needs are met for our family. We are to wash our wives in the water of the word.
Yeah.
We are to disciple our children. We are to make sure they have a roof over their head. We are to make sure they are protected from evil and protected from unsafe situations. We are called to put food on the table. We are called to, again, provide money and clothing and all these things. It is our job to make sure that our families are taken care of. And certainly we have wives who manage our household and take care of our kids as well. And it's there are many ways in which we do these things, but ultimately the responsibility falls to us.
Yeah.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, we give an account for that to our family, or give an account to God for the ways that we lead our family and provide for our family. Mm-hmm. And so what happens oftentimes is that we have a father who sees that it is his only job to provide financially for their family. Yeah. Mm. And so they neglect the spiritual provision. They neglect training their children and discipling their children, or loving their wife, or spending time with them. And they say, but I provided a lot of money. I provided a nice home. Yeah. And I would say that's a failure. Yeah. That is not the type of provision that the Lord has called us to. It really is a holistic provision. It is that king who looks at his family and says, okay, what are all the needs of my family? What has God called us to? Yeah. as husbands? And it's not just money. Mm-hmm. And it's not just, hey, I make sure my family's in church every Sunday, but I'm lazy at work and my wife's having to pick up the slack because of my lack of responsibility to provide financially. That's called a failure as well. Yeah. It's God has called us to provide holistically for our family, and I think that's a very important distinction that we need to see as men. Mm-hmm. Listen, being a husband, being a father, it's not for the weak. Yeah. It's not just for a man, a Christian man who wants to have sex all the time. It is for a man who sees a godly responsibility to take care of a family, to take care of a wife, to provide for her every need. It's a giant responsibility. And if you're not up for it, don't get married. And if you are married and you're not doing these, then repent and get a godlier friend or mentor to help guide you and to coach you and to teach you the things that you don't know and to steer you into the straight path that maybe you're walking contrary to right now.
Absolutely. Bit of a personal question for you here, Bryan, but I think we can learn from it. How did you get your money right? Actually getting into that aspect of men being financial providers, alongside being spiritual providers, emotional providers in their home. But touching on being financial providers, I just want to know your journey and just how you got your money right, and just what things you put in place, how you started to think in order to get to where you are now.
Sure. I was in a very interesting position where I was, young. working through high school, and as I worked as an employee of Chick-fil-A, just as a regular team member, I was a cashier. I truly didn't make a lot. I didn't make a lot in high school. I didn't make a lot in college. And I didn't make a lot even as I was a kind of a manager, kind of rising above the ranks, if you will. And I really didn't make a lot until I became an owner operator. And so we did our best to steward our finances early on. And, and that was saying, what did that look like? I think, my wife and I, as we were getting married, we were very clear on what was important to us. What were the things that we were going to be about, and what were the things we weren't going to be about? What were going to be the things that we would not sacrifice, and what would be the things that we could sacrifice? And so we started early on kind of talking about that. We got married March 1st, 2008, and we probably had this idea that, hey, we'll wait probably 4 or 5 years to have children. And we knew we wanted to have quite a few children, but we just wanted to wait a few years. And the Lord had different plans. And we got pregnant, I think 6 months into our marriage. And I was just working as a shift leader at my restaurant. I was not making a great deal of money by American standards. But we always knew that when my wife would be pregnant, we wanted her to stay home with the baby. And at the time, I just thought, man, I'm not making enough, but I know the Lord's going to provide. But we're not going to sacrifice what was one of our core convictions.
Yeah.
And so early on, we talked about just these core convictions, that what needs to be true of us, and what those weren't. It wasn't that we needed to go out to restaurants a certain number of times a week, that we needed to have a certain number of cars, that we didn't need to have a certain type of house. It was when you really get to your core convictions, all the other things seem to fall in place to say, like, okay, I just need this to be true, and all these other things are optional. And so when you really start to do that, you really can find that oftentimes you don't need that much to live off of. If when you say, hey, I don't need the nicest apartment, we're gonna live in an apartment that we can afford, that we can still give, and we can still be generous, and that my wife can stay home. And there was a point in which, even as an owner operator early on, because like I said, I went from being a team member to an owner operator overnight, right? That we drove one car even at that point, before I started making really, really good money as an owner operator. Just making these decisions that say, hey, we didn't want to, take out loans for cars and live in exorbitant houses. And I think those are the things that when you're very clear on what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, everything else seems to fall in place. You learn to live within your means. And the more you learn to live within your means, when you have more and you start to make more, then it provides, again, clear structure and boundaries and vision for and discipline for you to steward more in the future.
Yeah.
And so I think that's important, because I think that young people often think, not even just young people, but older people think that I can steward my money well when I start to make more. That I can be generous when I start to make more. And the reality is, no, it starts with stewarding your expectations. It really starts with theology. It all goes back to what you believe about money, and what you believe about contentment, and what you believe about, things. And I think that's the most important. Like, as I think about what fathers can do, it's one thing we did well, like, disciple your family first. Like, what does God's word tell us? Like, what is God's word, like, in light of who we are and in light of what Christ has done? What has he called us to? What is he calling us to as believers? And the call is not, hey, I need to be as wealthy as possible. That's not it. Now the Lord makes Christians, like certain Christians, wealthy, but that's not like the overarching purpose for every Christian. It's just not. It's not the overarching purpose for most Christians even, but he has called us to many different things. And so I think as we disciple our wives and we disciple our children to understand what God has called us to, and especially contentment, and we cast that sort of vision for our family, I think that is the most important money decision that you could make. Because I have many colleagues who make, a ton of money, just a ton of money, and they're still living paycheck to paycheck, and they're still not satisfied, and they're still stingy, and they still never feel like they have enough. And that's a sad place to be. That's a very sad place to be. And I've seen it. I've seen those temptations to make more and to feel like, well, once I make more, then all of a sudden, all of these money issues in our family are going to go away, and they're not. You have to think right about money. You have to have a right theology about money. You have to understand what God's word says about it, about contentment, about stewardship, about hard work, about idolatry, and not putting your hope in riches and putting your hope in money. Because that money can flee as quick as you get it. And unfortunately, in many cases, I've seen that. So I think one of the things that we did early on was really talk about that. We really talked about the importance of stewardship and the importance of what was acceptable and what wasn't acceptable. And then as the money came in, I've kind of felt like we naturally knew how to respond. And so I feel like that would be the biggest thing that I would encourage young men to think about, and even older men. Just, have you done a good job of teaching your family, but what does the Bible say about money? How should we think about these things? Because I really do think the Holy Spirit works through that to create contentment in our hearts and putting our trust in the Lord. We don't work hard because we want to be rich. We work hard because we're called to work hard, because it honors the Lord. And sometimes the Lord does bless those efforts with abundant wealth. Sometimes he doesn't. Certainly, I don't believe in a prosperity gospel, that if you work hard enough, you have enough faith, the Lord's going to make you rich. I don't believe that. But sometimes it's just the Lord in his, in his sovereignty gives wealth. And we don't make wise financial decisions to necessarily for the end goal of building the biggest nest egg possible. We steward our finances and steward our lives and our marriages to bring glory to the Lord, and to be generous and to create opportunities for others, and to I believe and have a firm conviction that we use that money to further the work of the church. And so I think it has to have some other end goal than just, I want to be rich and I want to have no problems in life. Because Ecclesiastes is pretty clear that there's never a point that you have enough money where all your problems are gone. And people say, well, yeah, but I would worry less. No, you won't. I can promise you that. I've had very little in life, and now I have a lot. And I can tell you this right now, like, money doesn't produce less worry in and of itself. It just doesn't. Just don't buy that lie. There's never a point in which money's going to make you feel content, that money's going to make you feel at peace, that money, as soon as you make a ton of money, you're going to want to make more and more and more money. And so money's a good thing, but money can be a very dangerous thing.
That is so good. In fact, I'm kind of mind blown at some of what you've said here. And just things that have kind of stood out to me just now is just the importance of having convictions and priorities, just nailing down what those are, what you want to live by, what's most important to you. Another thing that stood out to me in this is just the need to to disciple your family, and guide them in the truth, and get into what the Bible has to say about money, and then of course contentment. And um, I think this is profound, because I think we can really fall into this pragmatism and not really think about the way that we do things and the motive behind doing what we do. And so I really appreciate you just nailing down some really necessary thoughts that men need to think through as they think about providing and just managing their finance as well. In fact, what I get from this is that, you need to manage your theology well, manage your hearts well, as you manage your money. So I really appreciate that. Yeah. Just kind of moving on a little bit, Bryan. For men who are hardworking and they want to do well with their money, they want to manage it right, they're perhaps already trying to practice some of the character traits we just spoke about a moment ago, but they still feel like they can do a better job at managing their money. Maybe they're good at bringing home a paycheck, I suppose, but not very good at, I guess, at growing their finances and just managing their finances more responsibly. What advice would you give these kinds of men? What can they do to be better providers and to be better managers of the resources that God has blessed them with?
Sure. Yeah, well, that's good. I'd say the most important thing is understanding that how you manage your money is honestly more important than how much money you make. And I kind of alluded to that just a few minutes ago. But so what does that involve? I mean, really, that involves first, like, if you're struggling to save, do you have a budget? Do you? I mean, I know that's very clear, but like, have you and your wife sat down and said, "Hey, this is how much money I'm bringing in. Let's look at expenses. Are we, what can we cut back on? Where can we look to save money?" I'd say so. First, cutting expenditures is huge, and that really is a commitment by both the husband and the wife. Most of the time, husbands want to blame it on the wives. Well, she is just spending all the money. At least that's some of the stereotypes here in America. I don't know if that same stereotype exists in Zambia, but
certainly does.
But it's if she just would get her spending under control. Well, no, this is an effort where you both come together and as the visionary of your home, you say, "Hey, let's talk about these things. Let's talk about what's most important." And then once you have a clear understanding of your budget and a clear commitment to it, then I think that's where you look at the excess and say, okay, how can I better steward the excess, right? And so, first of all, I would encourage people to be really strong savers, to put an emergency fund aside, and to say, okay, I mean, especially in years like this, it's never been more important to say, like, nobody saw this coming. Nobody. I don't know how the economy is over there, but there's been many industries here that have just been halted, many businesses that have just shut their doors, and they were over leveraged, and they couldn't withstand it. And I would say that we need to prepare for things like that. We need to be able to go without income for a little while because we've saved in case something happens, whether we get sick, whether our company shuts down, or there's a natural disaster, or you just never know what. You think about how Joseph led in Egypt with the, I know that was a supernatural act, but I think we think about this, hey, let's go ahead and save in advance. Let's know that something's coming, and just assume that something's coming. We all know this. If you've been married long enough, there's going to be the car that breaks down. There's going to be the issue at your house that, you lose power, or you have a water, your pipes burst in your home. Things happen that are very expensive. Yeah. So we must be intentional about saving for that and having some kind of emergency funds. So once you've got your budget, and once you've got your some of your emergency funds, then I would say investing that excess is my encouragement would be to invest it in things that you know about, and invest it in industries or efforts or businesses or whatever that is that you're familiar with. So like maybe you admire Apple, the company. Well, do you know anything about the tech industry? Do you know anything about why their stock would go up or why their stock would? Don't invest in them. Don't just invest in things that you've heard of, but invest in things that you know, that you're familiar with. Because you're going to be able to make wiser decisions when you do that. And so if there's an industry that you want to know more about, go talk to somebody who is knowledgeable of that industry to help them teach you about that industry. And allow that, and the more you find out, then you would find out, oh yes, this is something I'd want to invest in, or no, this is not something that I would want to invest in. I would say that is super important. I would say other strategies would be, as you're younger, you can tend to make riskier investments when you're younger than you can when you're older. As you're older, you've probably made a good majority of the money that you're going to make in life, and so you need to be a little more conservative with it. When you're young, you can afford to take some risks and when I say risks, I don't mean taking on a bunch of debt. I would say taking on a venture or starting a business or things of that nature. I'd say when you're young, you can absorb a failed business more than you can absorb a failed business at 65 or 70.
Yeah.
So there's many different strategies, but for most people want to think about the investment aspect before they think about the budget and the savings aspect. I can't tell you how many people talk about investing when they don't have any savings. And so I would probably say for the majority of your listeners, if they're like a lot of people that I know, then don't start thinking about investing until you've thought about a budget, until you've thought about saving. And then on top of that, do you have already any other debts that you need to pay down? People want to invest in a portfolio before they pay down their already committed debts. So all three of those things, I'd say if you're not paying down your debts, if you're not saving, and if you haven't created a budget, then don't even think about trying to put your money in some other growth opportunity. It's just probably not wise. Sure, you could hit the jackpot, and sure, it could be an amazing windfall, but I just think in general, we need to just be careful how we steward.
That is so good, Bryan. Thank you so much for that. I just want to ask some specifics around what you've already spoken about. How can men drop a budget for men who have no idea how to drop a budget? I think you spoke about listing down expenditure and just learning how to manage that, but very specifically, how can men drop a budget? What things can they do to build a budget?
Yeah, so that's good. With it, I'd say obviously it starts with needs. And needs, food, shelter, clothing. I mean, those are our basic needs, right? That we really can't go without. And then from there, it is, and it's interesting that I would say that needs can always be a very contextualized idea. There would be the idea here in the United States that like electricity is a need. And I mean, I would argue that I would say, yes, I need electricity. But then, man, when I was telling you before the call, when we stayed in Zambia, there were long periods of the day where we survived just fine.
Yeah.
without it. And so I think it's just easy for us to throw out this word need.
Mm.
So I'd say with your budget, start with your needs.
Mm.
As you're looking at what do we need to survive? And a lot of times that starts with, again, the vision that you're setting for your family.
Mm.
What we're starting with the vision, then we move from the vision to the budget.
Mm.
Don't start with, okay, I'm going to base my vision and my budget on how much money I'm going to make.
Mm.
You start with saying, what's the vision for my family?
Yeah.
What do we need in order to survive?
Mm.
And then how much do I make in order to need to meet these needs?
Yeah.
And then from there, most of the time, what you're going to make is going to exceed your needs. So then you funnel in the desires. What are the things that we're going to budget for? So maybe we budget for television, or maybe we budget for cell phones, or we budget for we'd like to go out to a restaurant every now and then. We're going to budget for that versus just saying, let's just go out tonight. That's fine. It's easy to fall into that trap, right? Where all of our money is just kind of, we're just flippant with it, and we just hope that it's there tomorrow. And we hope we have enough by the time the next paycheck comes. You can do that, but you're never going to get ahead. And then what's going to happen is you're going to get in the car wreck. You're going to have something happen in your home that you've got to pay for, and your money's going to be gone. And then you're going to be in that same perpetual cycle for your whole life. So start with a vision about what we cannot live without. Create that budget, and then know, okay, we need to make this amount of money in order to survive. And then with your job, you say, okay, how much excess am I making? What else can we fit for the desires portion? And that's going to be different for everybody. And so, but I would say in your budget, don't treat something as a need if it's not really a need.
Yeah.
If you can go without, I've heard many, just in my current context, I've heard many people say they need 2 cars because it's a husband and a wife. I owned a restaurant and we had 1 car for a while. There was a point in which, like, early on in my early days of owning the business, my wife dropped me off at work. That might not be a big deal in Zambia, but I'll tell you, it was kind of a big deal in the United States, where, like, I had, team members who would drop me off at home, who worked for me. So, be okay with that. Be okay with that for a season, and knowing, hey, for us, we said, you know what, this isn't ideal for the long term. We'd like to get to the point where we have 2 cars, and we did, and we saved up and we got it, right? So I would just say, as you're creating this budget, be very honest with what needs are versus what wants are versus what's ideal, all of these things. And you budget according to your needs, according to what you're making.
Yeah.
I think that's the most important thing.
That is so good, Bryan. Thank you so much. And for guys listening to this, I hope you're taking notes, because this is treasure right now. Bryan, just a very specific question. Should there be a specific percentage that should go into savings? Like, in general, what's a good percentage to try to save with every paycheck, or whatever income streams people get? I know it's a very generalized question, but just how should people be thinking about saving in that regard?
That's a tough call, because I really think it depends on your income. That is one of those things that I would say is dependent on your income. The percentage that I can save now versus the percentage that I could save early on is drastic. But I think so. I think the better question is, how much house do I really need? How much car do I really need? Like, when we think through this, I think, because, so, like, what happens in America, we go, and I'm sure this is probably similar to maybe what happens in Zambia, but maybe not. You can go to a bank and they can tell you, here's how much house you can afford. And and I can tell you right now, as a business owner, the amount of house that I can afford is a lot bigger than the house I'm living in right now. The bank's job is to say, we want to make the largest sale possible.
Right.
And I think we need to ask these questions first of saying, how much is enough? How much house is enough? How much car is enough? How much food is enough? How much clothing is enough? How much technology is enough? How many books are enough? And that's, again, where it starts back at the vision, right? And so I think when we establish those things to say, this is good for our family.
Yeah.
This is sufficient.
Yeah.
And this is well under our means, that we're not scratching and clawing every month to make this work. We're not going to the bank and saying, what's the exact amount I can spend? And I want to spend exactly that much because you said I could spend it. Well, the bank's wrong sometimes. And so I think in the United States, I think they say you should spend about like 30% of your money towards just for shelter.
Yeah.
And man, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money, and a lot of people do it. But I would say shoot for a lot less than that if you can. But again, I know that's different for everybody. So no, I know it's a percentage. It's hard. I would say though, I mean, if you're able to at least set aside 10% of your income towards savings, I think that's a good goal. But a lot of people can save a lot more.
Yeah.
Based upon based upon how they choose to spend their money and how much house they buy. So I would ask those first questions first. How much is enough? And then say, okay, how much would we send to investments and how much would we send to savings? And I think those are good questions. But I'd say hopefully you can save up 10%, at least 10% of your money. And ideally, a lot of times it's ideal to say, can I go a few months without making any money? And if you've got a large amount saved, I would say, cool, then you can start to push higher percentages towards your investments and in money-making opportunities. So, there's not a right or wrong strategy here. The bigger heart of the matter is, there are definitely a lot of wrong strategies. I will say that. But there's not necessarily one surefire way to say this is the best way to manage your money, other than to say, let's have a clear vision of how much is enough for our family, that our standard of living doesn't necessarily have to rise every single time we make more money. To say that we can learn contentment like Paul does in chapter 4, that we can be content with much, we can be content with little, that as we study Proverbs 13, or we study the book of Ecclesiastes, that money in and of itself is fleeting, that money in and of itself is vanity and striving after the wind, that it really will never satisfy us and never make us happy. And that actually, as we read in Ecclesiastes, that like the enjoyment of money in and of itself is a gift from God, that only in him can we actually truly appreciate it for what it is, and that it is his sovereign gift, that we have a right view of money. Then we can say, okay, I'm going to enjoy it for what it is, see it for what it is, and therefore I don't feel like I've got to spend as much as I have, that it opens opportunities for me to save, and opens opportunities for me to give and be generous and create for the good of society and the good of my neighbor and the good of my church and all these things. I think, and there really is joy in that. And so my biggest thing that I would say for young people is just focus on that. How much is enough? Be really clear on that. Just because you make more doesn't mean that you have to flaunt it.
Yeah.
There's a proverb in Proverbs 13. I'm going to butcher it, but it says something to the extent of like, the rich man looks poor and the poor man looks rich. It's something to that extent.
Yeah.
And the temptation is to say, the more money I make, the more I've got to look rich. And it's that temptation.
Yeah.
And that's why billionaires keep fighting every day to be the highest paid billionaire, the billionaire. There's a temptation there. It's never enough. So if you're super clear on how much is enough, then I think the savings piece and the investments piece and the generosity piece will ultimately work itself out.
That's so good. And just a quick one, because I think this is really important to touch on as well, is just the importance of tithing.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give men there in terms of tithing?
Yeah, do it.
Yeah.
I would say it's extremely important. And I would say, I would tend to say that tithing is a baseline and not a cap.
Mm.
And I would say 10% is honestly I mean, I know there's folks out there that, are struggling to make ends meet. And it's like, dude, if I give 10%, then literally we're going to lose our home. I remember being there early on, and I remember like an older man just said, hey, develop a heart of giving, even if it's not a full 10%, start somewhere. And,
Yeah.
just trust the Lord. And so I would say if you're struggling at all, look, I don't want to give you a pass. I think you should live your life in such a way that that you honor the Lord with what He's given you. But I would also say that, again, I would say 10% needs to be a baseline.
Yeah.
That we're seeking to be overly generous, and that we're looking for ways to meet needs.
Yeah.
I would tend to say that, like, a lot of times with the money that I give the church, that it's a lot of times that it's 10%, standard, then looking for other needs to be met within the church for other various line items and things of that nature. It's not just like, well, I've given my 10% and that's it. So, but I also, I would say the amount per month or even percentage per month varies based upon needs and based upon, but I would say it's usually always 10.
Okay.
It's always at least 10.
Yeah.
And so, don't buy the lie that just because you tithe means the Lord's going to somehow give you more. He's not. I mean, that might not be the case. You don't tithe to get. Jesus is not our genie. He's not to be manipulated. The Lord gives out of His good, gracious pleasure, not because that we give. And so, the Lord gave me a restaurant with a great income back in the day when I wasn't as committed of a giver. So the Lord can work in spite of our lack of trust in Him. And so I'd say don't buy the mindset also that says that I have to wait until I make a lot to be generous.
Yeah.
People say that, and people think, well, one day when I just want to be wealthy because I just want to be so generous. Well, you can be generous now. And generosity is a mindset, and generosity is habitual, and it's a discipline. And I would just say, you might not have a bunch of money to give right now, but you have talents, you have time, and yes, you have treasure that you can be generous with.
Yeah.
So you might be a young man who you're doing your best to scrape by you, but how can you go help another friend in their home, or how can you go help another widow with work around their house or yard, or help get their groceries for them, things of that nature? How can you serve and be generous in other ways that the Lord has blessed you with? When you're young, oftentimes you don't have a lot of money, but you do have a lot of time.
Yeah.
And you do have a lot of sweat equity that you can go help others with. And so we should be people who are the most generous people in the world. Those of us who are in Christ, we've been given so much. And I think the more we understand that, the more we understand that, Lord, this is your money. It's not my money.
Yeah.
And you look at Luke chapter 5 at Peter and Jesus is preaching there by the lake, and he supernaturally causes them to bring in the biggest catch they've ever seen, where their boats are overflowing and their nets are overflowing. And ultimately they're so amazed, and they see Christ for who He is. and they ultimately follow him. They drop their nets and follow him.
Mm.
That it's not about the money. Like, this is likely the largest catch they ever made, the largest amount of money they ever made. But in that moment, they treasured Christ far more.
Yeah.
And I think that gives us the primary point of that passage is not money or fish. It's about the glory of Christ and what Christ will make us fishers of men. But I think it gives us a purpose in life to say that, like, our primary purpose is not money. Our primary purpose is right now is to go share the gospel as Christ builds his church. And so I think the more we see that, our money is a tool to do that. Our money is a tool to be generous, to give to the church as Christ builds his church.
That is so good. That is so good. Just kind of winding down now, Bryan. This one's a bit of a tricky one to answer, I think. But just what are some good ideas for things men can think about investing in? I understand that our contexts are different, but I mean, we do have people in your context who are listening to this who might just want some good tips on what to invest in. I think you'd given one really good tip before, invest in things that but what else can people look into? Is real estate something to look into, or stock something to look into?
Yeah, I mean, real estate right now, I know, at least in my area, is booming. But then it might not be in other parts of the country. It might not be in other parts of the world. And so that's where, again, I would say go into these areas to say, what is a solid investment right now? Where I'm at, real estate is booming. And so we've also been at a time where we've seen all-time highs in the stock market. But we know what comes up must come down. And so we know that that under the Trump administration, that we've seen a steady growth in the stock market. We've seen all-time highs. You just never know what society is going to do if someone else is elected, or if he's reelected. You don't know what's going to happen with the stock market. I would imagine that it would continue to increase. And so, but right now, stocks seem to be healthy. Real estate seems to be very healthy. I would say this, though. I would encourage young men to be to seek to be entrepreneurs and to create and to cultivate, to find opportunities to meet needs, to find opportunities to build businesses for themselves or improve already existing businesses that already exist. That's the thing that I would probably say I'm the most passionate about. Now, that's the way that I'm wired, and so that's the way that I would tend to want to invest my money. Is how can we create other ventures? How can we create other, whether that be rental homes or whether that be other small businesses that we could start. I would love to encourage young men to consider that. That God may have given you expertise. God may have given you gifts. Don't be scared to get out there and start your own business. You might think, my area needs this business.
Yeah.
They need this service. Or you could say, man, we're looking around and maybe it's plumbing, right? And the plumbers in our area are lousy. I remember having a conversation with someone when I was in Zambia, and they were frustrated with some of the industries there. And like, man, if somebody could just start it, if somebody could just do this, well, you know what? Do it. Why wouldn't you be the guy? If you've got some excess money and some excess time, start the business yourself. Go be the person and be the business that no one else is willing to be. And I promise you, I don't promise you, the odds are you're going to succeed.
Yeah.
You're going to find benefit in using your money and your time that way, where you work for yourself. You're not working for somebody else. You're building a business for you and your family and for the good of the community, and you're providing a good service that's needed. And so I think that's a way that I really want to encourage young people to think in a very entrepreneurial mindset, going out there and creating something for the good of society. And that's where I'd say is a good definition of entrepreneurship, is just being a creator of something useful for society. So if people can do that, man, that's my favorite. That's my favorite way that people would invest their money. Yes, real estate. Yes, stocks, and um, those are great. I mean, you're not going to go wrong in that. But man, I have a real heart to tell young people, hey, go take a risk, man. Go out there and take a risk that you couldn't take when you're 65 or you're 70. Go start something. Go and you've started this podcast, and I think it's a form of entrepreneurship, right? You're creating something that's needed. Our society and young men need a clear vision of masculinity, and so I think you're using an entrepreneur spirit and in a way that you're gifted to meet that need. And so how can we think about that in other ways, financially, maybe it's a coffee shop in Zambia, maybe it's plumbing in Zambia, maybe it's a new restaurant concept, or it's
maybe it's Chick-fil-A in Zambia,
man, maybe it's a Chick-fil-A in Zambia, or maybe, whatever that is.
Yep. Absolutely.
So
that's
that's where I would love to, as we think about Adam in the garden again, we see a man that was made in the image of God.
Yeah.
In this vision that we have of God, in Genesis chapter 1, is a God who creates, a God who, spoke and it was.
Yeah.
And Adam being made in the image and likeness of God, he is there in the garden to take dominion, to create, to cultivate, to take dominion. And I would love to encourage men to do that. And so take your money and do that. Go create, go take risks, go when you see a need and you think that, man, somebody else should do that, be the one to do it. If God's put that passion on your heart, man, go do it.
Absolutely. That is so good, Bryan. And, thank you for joining us today. Just in closing, I just want to ask you, like, what final words would you like to say to the fraternity of ordinary gentlemen listening to this?
Yeah, well, I'd say, man, always be learning. Don't ever feel like you've got it all figured out. And specifically young men, don't feel like you have to have it all figured out right now. I think there's this way that, like, we put up these prideful fronts sometimes that we refrain from being teachable because we feel like we've got to have it all figured out. Be the type of young man that knows he doesn't have it all figured out, but you're doing your best to figure it out. Yeah. That you are intentionally seeking out older, wiser, godlier men than you are, and you're asking them to tell you everything they know. Be almost annoying about that. And older men, be so intentional about seeking out younger men who need to be mentored. This is just a fatherless generation, and there are man after man who need an older man to guide them and to love them and to teach them and to encourage them, and sometimes kick them in the tail and tell them that, hey, you're not all that you're cracked up to be, and so we've all been there, right? We've all had the kick in the tail. We've all had the one who picks us up and hugs us and encourages us, and we need older men for that, and we need older men to do that. And so, be a learner, be teachable, be humble. It's a great thing to be a young man who's aggressive and who's ambitious. I think those are godly traits, but not for our own glory, and so we need to be men who are ambitious for God's glory. And so when it's not about us, and when it's about growing in Christ-likeness and sanctification, then oftentimes we're quicker to seek out older, godlier men who have been there and who have walked in places that we haven't walked yet. And so I think that should be, whether it's money or whether it's marriage or whether it's business or whether it's taking care of yourself physically, I would say seek out older men who know more than you do and just pick their brains, spend time with them, have them over to your home for dinner. Don't be intimidated by that. Don't be too good for that, too arrogant for that. You're in danger when you think you don't need that. So be a man who's intentional.
That is so good. Bryan, thank you so much for joining us today. I think I've learned so much from you, and I know the other guys listening to this have benefited from this as well. Let's do this again sometime, because I think there's just so much we could get mind on. So this was really good. Yeah, thank you so much. So once again, thank you for joining us on this amazing episode of The Ordinary Gentleman. And it is our prayer and our determination that we would be found faithful rather than wanting.